Greetings, growers. Jordan River with more Growcast today. Friend of the show, Dr. Coco, back at it. Got a great episode. We're going to talk about CO2. We're going to talk about energy consumption. We're going to talk about this article, this very interesting article that came out about indoor growing's effect on the environment. A little disclaimer. Listen, don't take this episode too seriously. Don't be writing me talking about news this or news that. I'm just joking around in this episode, guys. This isn't a political thing. I'm just having fun on the air. I don't take myself too seriously, and you shouldn't either. So enjoy the episode and enjoy the breakdown of the news article and enjoy show favorite Dr. Coco. Before that, though, real quick, shout out to the Foop. The Foop. Go to thefoop.com. This is fish-based organic nutrients in a bottle, perfect for the transitioning growers looking to try organic. Use code GROWCAST the first time you order for 10% off, and GROWCAST forever after that. That's the numeral 4 EVA. And that's 5% off forever. The Foop. I'm loving the Foop. It's a great additive for living soil. Use it at full strength in an inert medium. Just completely replace your other nutrients. It is a fish poop-based nutrient line. Certified organic. Increase your flavs. You will love this stuff. And I am going to have it in my garden as a staple, as a booster for probably ever. Forever. Thefoop.com. Use code GROWCAST the first time and then GROWCAST forever after that. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening and enjoy today's program. Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to Growcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Before we get started, make sure to share Growcast. Spread the show. I really mean it. Tell a grower. It really helps us out. Subscribe. Give us a good rating and review. Thank you, everybody. Patreon.com/Growcast for mounds of bonus content. Today we have none other than Dr. Coco back on the line. What's up, Dr. Coco?
Hey, Jordan. Happy to be back with you. Yeah, Dr. Coco, cocoforcannabis.com.
That's right. How are things, my friend? Oh, my God. I've been so neglectful. We had to do a Discord transition. I haven't posted anything on the challenges. I'm sorry, Dr. Coco. I promise I will.
Yeah, you moved off of Slack.
I'm the worst.
Slacking with you guys. I used to come in there and call everybody slackers. Now I don't call it.
Now it's just pure Discord. It's chaos.
Transition, but I'll be back in there this week.
Cool.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of things going on. We've got the New Year's Grow Challenge that we're sort of in mid-flower with, sometime in late April for most growers. And we have the Spring Autoflower Challenge that we're getting geared up for. That starts on April 20th on 4/20 every year. It's going to be a great challenge this year. We've got it organized into groups based on size of your grow. We got a bunch of cool prizes. So check out the Spring Autoflower Challenge. And, I've been really busy with grow light reviews and grow light testing and all that stuff. So a bunch of stuff going on.
It's a lifelong journey. The grow light testing is a lifelong journey. I'll be in that Autoflower Challenge a little bit late myself. I want to jump into questions, and I don't know, should we just jump right to the autoflower question, kind of recapping on something we talked about last time?
Sure, yeah. That brings up ties into the autoflower challenge.
Yeah.
But, by the way, though, in the autoflower challenge, you just want to make this point, people can grow photos too. We're wide open. It's just there will be a couple of side competitions that are only available for auto growers.
Nice. I like that, though, giving the auto growers their love, but including everybody. Again, I'll be in there. I'll be farther along.
Yeah, well, one of them, let's say that in preparation for this question, I kind of think I know what you're going to ask me. One of the auto side challenges that we're doing in the SAFC is the auto Supernova plant. We're on a space theme this year since we're growing it based on the size of your grow space. So the auto Supernova is the auto that can take up the most space.
Oh, that's killer.
Yeah. So to make an auto grow sort of to be as big and like wide, broad, whatever of a plant as you can to take up as much space. And then we're doing a second side challenge with autos, which is the party cup autos.
Nice. You go big or go small.
Those are
That's
opposite
great.
sides of the spectrum. Yeah. It'll be interesting to think about things like container size.
You queued me up for it. Because here's the thing. We did a great episode. Man, all your episodes get really great feedback. But that last one we got great feedback on. You spent a lot of time talking about up-potting and how up-potting is a very good way to fill out the middle of your root ball, regardless of if you're growing photoperiods or autos.
Yep.
I wanted to circle back around and drill in specifically during that episode, but we kind of just moved on. People kept writing me about the taproot theory, this theory that one of the reasons you don't want to up pot autos is that if the, main tap root reaches the bottom, or I've also heard it put, if it just becomes kind of root bound, it'll trigger the flowering cycle. That's why you see little solo cup auto flowers grow the way they do. They don't grow for the whole veg period and then flower. I wanted to get your take on that.
I'm not convinced on that because we did. So we'll have a really good experiment with that.
You tell me.
With our party cup autos, if all the party cup autos start flowering before the rest of the plants in those grows, then we'll know something's up. But
I can't wait to see that.
They may a little bit if you really get root bound. But we did this already with party cups back in the plant training grow challenge, and a number of people grew autos right next to their party cup auto. That was one plant was in like 5 gallons, and the other one was in a party cup, and the big difference was the size of the plants, not the time to harvest.
Interesting.
There may have been, and I didn't take careful notes or data on this, but it certainly wasn't a trend that growers were reporting sort of en masse. I do think it might speed things up a little bit, but
sure.
What you would do is sort of induce flowering earlier if you really got a plant bound. Now, see, there is sort of something to that. Plants won't enter flowering when they're too immature. And one of the signals to the plant that it's sort of mature enough to enter flowering is that in a container, if its roots tap out.
So it's an amalgam of things.
Yeah. If you have a plant that's just has a really tiny root mass and it's still growing, it hasn't reached the edges of the containers, it will probably wait until it reaches the edges of the containers to like morphologically flip.
This is mind blowing. You're right. It won't flower if it's too young. We know this because there is a overseas grower who grows who grows photo periods under a 12-12 light cycle through their whole life.
Yeah, 12-12 from seed. Yeah, it takes them a little while before they flip over. Exactly.
They look fine. I mean, I'm sure if something went wrong, you can make all these arguments, yada yada. But I've seen pictures of his grow. They look great.
Right. So back to the root thing. If you're potting up and your plants, I mean, that's sort of the whole point is you want the roots to fill in. Now, if they really get bound, sure, that would be the point where the plant starts to, make changes internally to deal with an obstacle that it's facing in life.
That makes sense.
But to the point where they're still just filling in, I don't think there's any risk that you're going to induce flowering sooner.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and actually, I think so. You want them in the small containers. Let's get back to why you would do this in the first place. It is so that you can keep the conditions for the roots really sort of in the optimal area. When you add water to media, the number one thing that takes the water out of the media is the plant.
Right.
And if you have a tiny little plant that doesn't have a lot of root mass, and it's in a 5-gallon container, and you saturate that 5-gallon container with water, that water just sits there.
If it's in soil, it could kill your plant. Yeah.
Sure. A little bit of it drains away, but a little bit of it evaporates off, but most of it just sits there.
Right.
And it loses its dissolved oxygen the longer it sits there. And it creates a hypoxic condition in the root area, in the container where the only spaces that the roots have sort of an adequate amount of oxygen is right along the edges of the container. And so, what ends up happening in that situation is this little root is this little plant with this little root mass is like in this waterlogged media that has low dissolved oxygen content. And instead of growing its roots through like the main portion of the media, it'll grow across the top, over to the sides, down the sides of the container and to the bottom, all these areas where it can get that dissolved oxygen. And it leaves that middle area void of roots and saturated with low dissolved oxygen water. And you end up with a smaller root mass on the plant.
Wow, makes a lot of sense.
The plant will therefore tap out. The roots get to the bottom of the container faster because they're desperately sort of looking for places to grow that have oxygen. But you've sort of avoided having a decent root mass for your plants. So, yeah, I think it's helpful to really understand that side of it.
So you're saying the answer is like Wolfman? The answer is yes and no? You just gave a Wolfman
yes
answer.
and no. It has an impact. I definitely think getting your plant root bound, getting a young auto root bound will impact how fast it flowers.
Fascinating. But you're saying root bound. It has nothing to do with this magical taproot touching the bottom of the container.
Tapping out in the container. I don't think just filling in. Yeah, I mean, when I transplant my autos, I can hook them out of the party cups, and like take a picture of the entire little party cup size thing of cocoa, mind you, not even soil, which has more adhesive properties, but of cocoa that just sort of like the roots are all holding it together.
Wow. So you do let them fill out.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. I wonder, I've seen before too, and this is just observation, I have no idea. I've seen sometimes if I feel like a plant is, for instance, if I have a clone, a photoperiod clone, and it grows out into like a 1 gallon, and I kind of get lazy, it doesn't get transplanted. I sometimes feel like when it gets extra root bound is when it shows sex. I wonder if that, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's hitting obstacles. And so when it hits these obstacles, the plant sort of goes into a reproductive mode, or it wants to go into a reproductive mode.
That makes sense, yeah.
That's how plants then successfully sort of pass their genetics on to the next generation, right? And when that plant hits an obstacle, it's like, oh shit, I might not be able to keep growing for very much longer. I better enter my reproductive phase. So plants do that. Lots of plants do that in response to stress.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense from a natural selection standpoint.
Right, exactly. Trees that are dying put out tons of seeds.
Right.
They put all their remaining energy into sort of putting out seeds because they're dying, and they're like, crap, I better, reproduce as much as possible at the end. I mean, there's no sort of conscious thought behind this, right? That's like you said, this is just a product of selection.
Very fascinating exploration, and not exactly the answer that I was expecting. So thank you for that, Dr. Coco, and thank you to the listeners who wrote in and were like, the taproot. You didn't say the taproot theory.
Yeah. So, I don't advise, although we're going to do this. So if you guys are curious about this, come join us in the Spring Auto Flower Challenge. Grow some autos like you normally would in, either following a transplanting, potting up strategy, or start some in full containers. Start one in a party cup and let it stay there as your party cup auto and see. We'll not only see with your grow, you'll be able to see with, dozens, hundreds of other grows that are also doing this, and really be able to see if there's a pattern behind these things. It's one of the cool things that we're thinking about now as we set up these side challenges and stuff, because we have a pretty good pool of growers to be able to almost run like experiments. I mean, our sample size is pretty large.
Yeah, it's cool to be able to have such a snapshot of the community, and I like how you theme it, because it really gives you a good kind of, it's not scientific data, but it's about as close as you can get right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just, you overwhelm the sort of the quality of the sample by the size of the sample.
Exactly.
So we have hundreds of growers, then you have enough data that you can be fairly reliable about, even if, each individual grower is
a little bit different
on their own.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point, man. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're already deep into it. Let's move on to this next point here that I'm dying to discuss this with you. First of all, the last episode you kind of talked about, and I kind of chided you for apologizing, talking about the third agricultural revolution.
Yes.
And it was really cool, man. I actually got feedback on that as well. And maybe in a different episode, we can dig deeper into that kind of agricultural history. I thought that was awesome. And it's really cool.
It comes up, man. I mean, I see that. I see that in, we were going to talk about that article about environmental stuff today.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I'm going to struggle not to sort of relate that to global agricultural trends in different ways as well. So yeah,
I would love that.
Cool. I'm really glad that your Growcast audience out there can appreciate sort of other angles on agriculture.
Of course, it's fascinating, man. And of course, those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this article that's been circulating all over the web, referring to a deeper study on the indoor cannabis cultivation industry's effect on the planet. And Gizmodo picked it up as, indoor weed farms are hotboxing the planet. Clever.
Yep.
This picture is terrible. Do you see the clawing that's going on? It either looks like a serious pest problem, or the cannabis example they use on this one. It's either a serious pest problem or like massive heat. The leaves look like they're curling under and clawed and crisp, almost like there's a horrible mite problem. Anyways, that's the first thing that I noticed.
Oh, are you talking about the cover article?
I'm talking about the Gizmodo, yeah, the one that they used at the top. It's not good.
There's some issues. You're correct. Those are, some late bloom issues probably caused by excessive PK.
So this article is highlighting the impact on the environment of the indoor cannabis cultivation industry, but it specifically goes through some metrics that I wanted to run by. I want to make something really, really clear. I'm not downplaying the effect of indoor cultivation, on the environment. Obviously, we love regenerative agriculture, outdoor growing here. We love there's huge, we're huge proponents of that here on Growcast.
Yep.
But I do want to kind of scrutinize this article because,
hold on, I am too, right? And those environmental impacts on the planet are something that I'm sort of very concerned about. It definitely is one of the things that I take into consideration in terms of determining how to manage my own grow and really why I grow the way that I do and why I teach other people to grow the way that I teach other people to grow. All of that is informed by a sensitivity to these ecological questions about impact on the planet. So there's definitely a real issue there, but I agree. There's some, the thing that I think about this article is almost how much of it does it apply to us?
Right. As home growers, you kind of mean? Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but you're right. It's so interestingly enough, I was just talking to someone else. People hear us kind of bicker, which is like one of my favorite parts of doing this show is when you and I get into it. And someone was talking about how, you got to turn cocoa onto regenerative this or that. I'm like, cocoa is pro-regenerative agriculture. You're kind of anti large scale indoor cultivate. I mean, obviously like laws and everything.
So to that extent, I agree with this article.
Yeah, I do too.
So this is the angle sort of towards the larger agricultural dimension here. There's basically two ways to farm. There's a small scale labor intensive way to farm, and there's a large scale resource intensive way to farm.
Oh.
And again, sort of the history of the last couple hundred years has been a massive transition from small scale labor intensive farming to large scale input intensive farming, energy intensive farming, water intensive farming.
Right.
All of these things replace human labor. So the proportion of the population that is engaged in farming has diminished tremendously as, the labor needs of growing food have been replaced by chemicals and machines and, pumps and other processes like that. So that is sort of the background of all of this.
And again, if you understand the history of cannabis cultivation, which I'm no expert on by any means, but I do know why we're all growing indoors and why all this technology advanced in the first place. Everyone used to be outdoors. Talking to these old Humboldt guys, it's when camp used to start rolling through in the 70s or whatever, the great push indoors.
Yeah, it's legal.
Yeah,
it's a response to the legal regime.
Yeah, so here's what there's two things I kind of push back against, even though the heart of this article I completely support, which is, less impact on the planet. The two things I push back on is kind of not understanding how we got here, and then also some of the specific metrics they push. Like, okay, listen, I've been anti-media for a long time, way before it was cool for one side of the political aisle to not like the news or whatever. I've been talking with Dr. Joel Wade on the impact on psychology of things like media and social media and all of this. I don't like when I feel like they came up with the title first. You know what I mean? They came up with the idea first, and then they go, okay, how can we put the numbers in that fit our narrative perfectly? Did you look at how much water they claim to use? 3.8 liters per plant per day? Who is using that much water?
Do you know what 3.8 liters is? Anytime you see something like that, that's 1 gallon. That's 1 US gallon. And they want to be more sciencey. So they actually decided to feed 1 gallon per day. And then they converted it to liters to report that. Because it's more common and that's about twice as much water as I use. But
I don't know.
The whole metric there. So let's back up. Gizmodo didn't write the study.
True.
So there's
Good
a
point.
difference between the articles and the original research
Good
study.
Good point.
The research study was done, led by Jason Quinn, a professor at the Department of Colorado State University. And they're really looking at the impact of the large scale commercial farms that are in Colorado, the indoor farms, and what their carbon footprint is.
Right.
So some of the assumptions that the researchers made, I agree. The water rate seems high. And the fact that they're doing it per plant, I don't know. I requested the full text of the article so I could get in and see the methodology on that. I don't know if that's something that the journalist decided to translate because of Gizmodo's audience, but they should determine the water usage per square meter of canopy, not per plant.
Right.
It really, to make a generalizable sort of argument there, it doesn't make any sense to do it per plant.
Good eye.
Now, sort of the other side of that is I kind of believe that there are some commercial farms that use a gallon of water per plant per day.
Sure. Is it an accurate representation is my question, but that's a good point.
May be. It may reflect some actual industry practices.
Right.
It depends on what their management plan is for their effluent, for their wastewater. Most of the commercial farms need to have a plan for how they're managing their effluent. If they're fertigating like that, if they're producing runoff, the plants themselves are not consuming a gallon of water per day. So if they are watering at that rate, they're generating probably excessive quantities of runoff. And this is one of the things that, like, I got back to, labor intensive versus resource intensive farming. If you're one farmer with 2 plants, then you can really carefully control and provide exactly as much water as your plant needs. If you are one farmer with 10,000 plants, then you set up a drip system and you don't even look at all of the plants. I mean, you're going to have a plant somewhere in there that you may not even have seen or remembered or whatever. You're certainly not checking its runoff every time you water, or even every day, or even ever. So that what you tend to do there is just overwater. Especially if you're in a media like Rockwool or Coco, where overwatering is not a concern. The concern would be not watering enough. You just overwater. That's a good way to sort of protect yourself by being wasteful in a large scale setting.
That all makes sense.
And that's sort of one of the points that, at scale, you end up doing things more sort of wastefully than you could do them in a smaller scale setting.
Yeah, true. That's true. I have something to say on that.
Yep.
We'll be back with Dr. Coco in a second, but first, share the love with Plant Success, the line Plant Success by Plant Revolution. Go to plantrevolution.com. Check it out, everybody. Find them in your local hydro store. You know their Great White Myco product, a great choice for Myco. Their Orca liquid Myco, which I always have as a staple in my garden. And now try their King Crab and more. The King Crab, you heard all about it on the episode with Jim Egan. If you haven't heard that one, go back and listen to it. It is a very, very enlightening episode. And I'm using that King Crab all the time in my garden. It is now part of my rotation. You will see your plants perk up from that highly concentrated beneficial bacteria. Get their Myco Chum, throw that in the rotation. Plant Success has what you need to take your garden over the top. Beneficial microbes formulated specifically for cannabis. It's going to increase your yields, increase your plant's health, flavor, potency. Everything is going to improve with these added microbials from Plant Success by Plant Revolution. Plantrevolution.com, but you're going to want to find them in your local hydro store. They're all over, and they're partners at Growcast because we love these guys. Enjoy, everybody, and thank you to Plant Revolution. All right, let's get back to Dr. Coco. Before I get into my riff, though, let's do the CO2 thing, because part of this article also talks about pumping CO2, and I wanted to ask you, is this pointing to something you've said before, which is, do you think a lot of growers are using the CO2 improperly and cycling it? Because my feeling is if you pump CO2 in a sealed space, you probably don't have to use that much, or am I confused on that? You know what I mean? Like,
plants take it out of the air.
Yeah, just give me your thoughts.
The plants take it out of the air, but you're right. If the space is properly sealed, it's not the carbon dioxide that you're worried about.
Okay.
This is another reason I need to get deeper into that article.
Right.
The actual carbon dioxide that you're actually releasing, obviously, is like a greenhouse gas, right? But it's not as significant as the amount of carbon dioxide that is generated by burning fossil fuels to get the container of CO2 to your house.
Right.
So that's not the source. The reason that CO2 supplemented grows have a heavier environmental impact is because they have to then do air conditioning and dehumidification to control the rest of their climate variables.
Right. Okay.
And the air conditioning and the dehumidification are huge energy sinks. So the sealed grow with CO2 becomes more energy intensive, but it's the climate variables. It's the managing of the climate variables.
That makes tons of sense.
So this is another reason that small scale grows can manage their climate in most cases effectively using ventilation. We can completely avoid, dehumidification, which is a huge energy sink. A lot of us can completely avoid air conditioning. And obviously that makes a tremendous savings in sort of how much energy you're investing for your grow. But let's step back a second and think about like growing a plant outdoors, where you put like a seed in the ground and rain falls from the sky.
Right.
And there's bugs that live in the ground that have symbiotic relationships with the root, and bugs, microorganisms. And there's a sun that
provides everything you need. Perfect
free
PPF.
Energy every day. Right. So in that setting, I mean, it's just so much of a smaller environmental impact. I think that when we choose to grow indoors, we have to supplement for the sun.
Sure.
And that becomes a huge energy cost for the whole decision to grow indoors. I think that we need to be aware of sort of making the best use of that. I think there are reasons for us, mostly legal reasons. I actually think the legal reasons totally dominate the quality reasons for growing indoors. But there are reasons to grow indoors. But if you decide to do that, then I think you have to really consider, okay, I'm going to have a pretty big environmental impact, and I want to try to minimize it as much as I can.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that I'm getting as much sort of produce out of this as I can, because I'm going to have this impact one way or the other.
That's right. And I think that, to be honest, a lot of compassionate people just have a hard time coming to grips with that. Literally the fact that, like, just as a human on the planet, like, we are here to consume, and we've kind of done so much damage that people feel bad about that. But the fact remains, like, just to be alive, you are constantly consuming, you are constantly producing waste. It's about doing it responsibly. It's about doing your part and doing what you're comfortable with, not beating yourself up or beating your neighbor up too bad. What I don't like is the incomplete picture. That's kind of what I want to cap this off on with this article.
And that's the thing. So let me get to that. A lot of people try to be very environmentally friendly with their grows, and they'll try all these natural plant fertilizers or different kinds of do-it-yourself methods. They'll try to reduce their impact. They'll try to reduce their inputs, but they're still burning their lights because they're still growing in a dark space unless they have that artificial light.
Exactly.
And they think that they're really trying to reduce their environmental impact by, not using nitrogen fertilizer, for example. But they're generating half of the yield for the amount of electricity that they're using as somebody that is using nitrogen fertilizer. And in those situations, I think that you need to reevaluate sort of how you're measuring your environmental impact and what you're considering.
Yeah, and your values.
This is the reason that I use conventional fertilizers, is because they're going to provide sort of the best response, the most controllable response, and the most repeatable results, that I'm not going to end up wasting my electricity. I know for a damn fact how much I can produce when I run my lights for as long as I have to run them for a grow. The lights are absolutely the biggest environmental impact in my grow.
Wow.
And so I'm doing everything I can to sort of make sure that I'm producing the best quality cannabis from that investment of electricity. And I think that's going to end up generating a grow that's far smaller ecological footprint than somebody that's trying to just, make sort of arbitrary decisions about, I don't want to use this or I don't want to use that. You need to think about sort of the whole systems and be aware that it's the energy that we're tapping into. If you're using air conditioning or dehumidification, that's even potentially more power than the lights are running.
That's such a good point, Coco, because again, I do think it comes down, what you just said is what most people don't think about. I do still think it comes down to your values. I think some people don't want to support certain companies, yada, yada. As far as environmental impact, I think what you just said gets overlooked completely. And that's a really, really good point. It's just about your values. And like you said, it's like, listen, there's no getting away scot-free here. You just got to do your part. We are where we are in life. The planet is where it is. Again, I just don't like the incomplete picture, because I want to say something like this article, and they say that, that you never realize how inaccurate the news is until it reports on something that you're an expert in, yada, yada. But like, they don't mention anything about the regenerative agriculture movement, which is like being driven by cannabis right now. All of the plant science that's being driven by the industrial benefit of this. Even
along with the advancements in horticultural lighting.
Right.
It's actually really interesting because there are other applications for this. So when you think about all the technology that like the space program developed and then found other applications in everyday life, right now, cannabis for horticultural lighting is like that, man. It's creating a huge cash cow where so many people are doing so much in investment. We're increasing the efficiency of indoor farming. We're increasing the efficiency of the lights. We're understanding more about how all of these things work. And that clearly has sort of secondary potential benefits for humanity's future.
Give me a break.
Potentially back to the space program and growing plants in space or other things like that,
right. I mean, listen, there's no free lunches in nature, but industry drives progress faster than anything else. There's no altruism or, spirituality. Nothing
is driving, the indoor horticultural market, which is really interesting because they're doing vertically farming for vegetables in Europe. There's a ton of it in Iceland.
Whoa.
Which is an interesting thing to circle around for. You know why they do a bunch of indoor vertical vegetable farming in Iceland, right?
Why?
Free power.
Oh yeah, everything there is on geothermal. The whole country
is on geothermal. So they have all of this power. So one of the things that they're doing with it is growing vegetables indoors.
That's what bothers me. And focus on the solution.
We can take advantage of those. The sort of environmental impact of that is really small because they're the type of energy that they're tapping. And, we have to think in terms of whole planet solutions, in terms of the systems level.
Yes.
And one of the things that I definitely think far too many cannabis growers are caught up in is they want to sort of be environmentally responsible, but they're too narrowly focused on fertilizer. Or they're too narrowly focused on one specific element of their grow.
I totally agree.
And they're not thinking about sort of that whole systems approach.
And I think that they beat themselves up too much sometimes. And I think that they lash out at other growers too much sometimes over their practices, when in reality, if you want to really get down to it, your small grow is pretty insignificant, especially when there's massive 54,000 square foot cultivation facilities, apparently using a gallon of water on each plant, if that's the case. Now, I do want to focus in on something you said there, which is, and this is what I was alluding to, which is, listen, the reason, like I said, I think they probably came up with this headline first, and they know that it'll get clicks. And these news articles love to spin negative because that's what, for some reason, gets more clicks and gets them more money. It's just the truth. There are a lot of great solutions out there, and a lot of it's being driven by the cannabis industry.
I agree. I actually think that the researchers it certainly appears that the researchers
had something in mind,
making their decisions in such an effect because they wanted to show how much impact it was making.
Of course, Coco. That's why I don't trust studies. That's why when I studied when I'm doing the Coffee Health and Science podcast,
you need to read the studies. So some of the issues that I'm having with the way you're describing this is because you're talking about it like Gizmodo is responsible for this. They're really not.
No. I was going to get specific.
They wrote it up, right? So a bunch of news organizations this was published in an academic journal, and a bunch of news organizations get a press release when they publish something like this. So the authors sent out press releases, and then, an organization like Gizmodo will have a science writer who's responsible for, browsing through these press releases from different academics that
and then they write up the article,
finding ones that are interesting, and then writing it up as a public article.
I want to be clear. I know that Gizmodo didn't spin anything with the 3.8 liters. I know that here's my problem. My problem is Gizmodo, like almost all, if you look into what the amazing Randy did to expose how the news does their research.
Their job is to assume. So, Jordan, this is a peer-reviewed article that was published in a peer-reviewed journal. What is it, Springer or something? I was looking it up. I haven't got it. It's in Science, Nature Sustainability, and it's peer-reviewed article. So the journalists specifically don't do any of their own background research on that. Gizmodo's job, that reporter's job, is simply to try to summarize the article in a way that the popular audience could understand. But they're not responsible for vetting it. They assumed that the vetting was done by the peer reviewers from Nature Sustainability Journal.
This Jason Quinn fellow, like you said, from Colorado State University, when you see them post a quote like his right at the top where, consumers aren't considering the environmental effect of cannabis. It's an interesting, they're putting out a thought, they're putting out an emotion, they're putting out a generalization. Right. I would say cannabis consumers are some of the most conscious. Now, Americans don't consider environmental effects of their.
I agree.
How can you I don't know how you can write up an article like this and not have something not click in your head where you go, can I put in a part where, on the other hand, there's a large movement of you don't talk about why we got here, why we're indoors in the first place. You don't talk about this massive subculture. It's literally ingrained in the cannabis culture, Coco. That's what's bothering me. It's ingrained in the cannabis culture, but it's completely being left out. And again, this guy saying, consumers aren't considering the environmental effect of their cannabis. I think cannabis consumers are some of the most conscious consumers. It just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I'd like to think that too. I do want to just suggest that there are other types of cannabis cultivators out there. People that are in it just for the money, not in it for the love of the plant or for the love of ecology or anything else. The black market, the history of it was use of a lot of really questionable fungicides, really questionable pesticides that may have had negative health impacts on the consumers that were using it. People in black market cannabis doing things that would not be regulated and would get other farms shut down. So we do have to be aware of, and then there's a ton of farmers that are growing primarily for their own use and that are really conscious and really sort of all about these things. I run into some people every once in a while. I would say 90-10, right, is 90% of the people I deal with are really sort of growers like you and I in that regard, Jordan. But there are some out there certainly that are in it for the money.
Oh, of course. But I just don't like also how this is treated as some impossible problem. Because like I said,
I don't think it is. They're saying that they want to push commercial operations outdoors. And from that perspective, I think from a policy implications, this is an important article,
right?
Important research for that.
It'll hopefully have good impacts. You're right. But what bothers me is take a look at a bigger crop. It's called coffee.
Yeah.
And I've seen it done. And that's so much of a harder crop to grow, Coco. So it just bothers me when it's like, here's this huge list of problems. I understand how the American journalism process goes.
Coffee indoors?
And does not work out great. I understand the American journalism process. It's turned into this copy and paste type news cycle. And what's
the world we live in.
What I referenced earlier, I need you listeners to go check this out. There's a documentary called An Honest Liar. An Honest Liar. It's James Randi. He's one of the most famous magicians. Coco, he put out one of those press releases about a psychic that he had made up. It was his partner, this fake psychic, and he toured him around Australia. All of the newspapers printed all of this stuff. None of them looked back up into it. Dude, it was so bad, Coco. And it really opened my eyes as to how
It's the funding model, man. There's no money in journalism anymore. So they repackage articles that other people write. They take bits directly from commercial firms that are nothing more than souped up ads for things that are packaged as like infotainment things or whatever, and display them. They purchase most of their stories off of wire services. Most small journalist organizations don't even have decent sort of reporting or editing in-house anymore. Yeah, but this is a crisis created by people aren't paying for quality journalism the same way that they used to. People don't subscribe to these things.
It's come down to
revenues dried up, and they've had to cut corners. And we're all sort of people that used to consume a lot of higher quality journalism for free are, absolutely. Somebody's got to pay for those things.
Just to sum it up, I guess I'm disappointed that with this article, all about the environmental impact of cannabis on the planet in the earther section of Gizmodo, the word regenerative agriculture doesn't even get mentioned. That's all. It's just frustrating.
I told you, we were.
Dude, we get fired up. I love doing podcasts with you, man.
I'm glad. I love doing them with you too.
Getting fired up. Man.
And I think this is a good conversation. I think this gets people thinking. I think we all should be aware that each and every one of us, that it has an environmental impact, like you said. This is like the laws of thermodynamics. You can't opt out of the system. You're playing the game. And the way that we play is really what we can control. We can control sort of, how conscious we are, what we're paying attention to. And when we choose to do things that have impacts, and growing cannabis indoors has impacts, we need to think carefully about what impacts we're willing to have, how we manage that, and how we feel about these things. I absolutely think that we shouldn't be oblivious to them. So I appreciate the article in terms of it gets us thinking about these things. I think really the takeaways are that it highlights how, if we're growing indoors, we need to be conscious. I think that it highlights the fact that growing indoors at large scale is probably inappropriate unless the energy is really free or low cost, low environmental cost energy like they have in Iceland. I think that it highlights the fact that if you are growing indoors, you need to optimize your system so that you're not wasting a bunch of water, you're not wasting a bunch of nutrients, you're not wasting a bunch of energy in other ways. But I really think that the takeaways here is it's okay to grow indoors in a small scale where you're doing a labor-intensive setup. But we should really push the commercial market towards outdoor cultivation, period. And we should free up the ability for cannabis to move across borders, state borders and international borders. I mean, it would be an ecological disaster if we all had to start growing our bananas in grow tents in our houses.
Right.
We prefer to grow bananas in Guatemala and Nicaragua and Honduras and other places in Central America and ship them to us because it's just much more efficient ecologically in terms of everything to do it that way. And some of those considerations have to be made with cannabis market as well if we want to sort of take advantage of the real advantages about where things can be done effectively. The legal regime with cannabis is sort of so superimposing on that.
Exactly.
But I think at a craft scale where you're really doing a labor-intensive grow, not an energy-intensive grow, I don't think the numbers that Jason reports in this, I shouldn't call him by his first name. What's his last name? Quinn. That Quinn reports from the CSU study. I think you can avoid, using a gallon of water. I think you can avoid dumping air conditioning. I think you can avoid dumping dehumidification energy into your grow. I think you can maximize returns to the energy that you invest in the lights. And I think that if you do that, you can have a much smaller carbon footprint or an ecological footprint in your indoor grow.
You're so right.
But you're going to have one. So you're not going to be able to avoid that. You're not going to be able to avoid that growing organically or growing biodynamically indoors.
Exactly.
And to the extent that growing organically or biodynamically indoors slows you down or results in smaller harvests, it may really have a larger environmental or ecological footprint than growing hydroponically in cocoa like I do. I mean, that's why I chose to grow like I do, because I think that I have a smaller ecological footprint than indoor organic growers.
It's a very interesting thought.
Fighting words, Jordan, fighting words.
No, you know what? I love that, man. Again, I think it comes down to your values, you know? Like some people aren't going to support the bottle, but you don't think that you're getting a free lunch in nature if you're plugging in a grow light. And I think that that's exactly what you're saying with this article is pushing the industry outside, good thing. Like on a large scale, good thing.
It really should be. I mean, any crop should be grown, any crop at scale, unless you're, again, like in Iceland where they're tapping into geothermal energy or something like that. We got the sun. I mean, the sun is like this amazing thing. It's there every day for free. Let's use that.
So again, coming to the imposing legislation, like you said, pushing it outside, good thing. But here's what I'm worried about is articles like this kind of putting a bad look on the industry and maybe slowing down progress which we all know if we can get hemp bumping as a whole, think about what that means to the environment between hempcrete and all of the medicinal benefits and all of the textile benefits. Don't get me started. I don't think this article, cannabis is a train. It's a big long train now.
I
agree. It's not going to derail it.
I don't think this article can stop it.
But you know what I'm saying,
I do think that we need to push that train onto a better direction. And I think pushing legalization towards recognizing, like in California, we can grow indoors, but we can't really grow outdoors. It's so much more difficult. And there's such a smaller sort of amount of the state counties where it's okay to grow plants outdoors, even on your own land, even hidden, but you can grow indoors. And that's just a way of encouraging people to use electricity that they might not have to use. So I definitely think that to that extent, we should be having this conversation about should, cannabis farms are coming online at scale. This is going to continue to happen over the next decade or longer. And this should be a conversation. I really appreciate it for that matter, because so many states are pushing towards indoor only cultivation because they're concerned about what if the kids see it growing in a field? It's like, screw that. We need to do this in an environmentally responsible way. And having people grow inside of warehouses, like literally building a roof over something and then recreating the sun indoors is just, it's not an effective way to promote a legalization regime. So I hope the people that read this are legislators and voters and people that are thinking about how do we want to legalize cannabis in our state or in our area.
Well, I hope so too, but I guess my worry is that some people are going to read this and they go, well, we can't, as you said, for the kids, it's out of the question outside, and now this is bad. And I just feel that you don't want it being painted in a bad light. Again, all about the impacts of cannabis, no mention of all the benefits that it could bring, if we put this on a federal level. So it's a little weird.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, we definitely have different impacts. I don't like some of the methodological decisions that Quinn and his team made, but I'm cool with the sort of thrust of the article,
right?
Which is basically saying large scale indoor cultivation is environmentally destructive. I agree with that.
Can't argue with that. Hey, but here's the one thing, because you say take a look at Iceland or whatever. Have you seen the new bladeless windmills, the Sky Braiders?
No.
Oh, dude, you got to look this up. Yeah, this is because I had a really interesting conversation with an engineer who had worked on those giant wind turbines before. Dude, there's a whole hidden truth behind those. If those things break down, there's only 2 companies in the world that repair them.
Yeah.
And it's Australia or Germany. And you have to put this big wind blade on a truck and fucking ship it across the, there's a dark hidden.
Yeah, no, I know the big ones. Yeah.
I guess the new
ones. They also
ones
kill birds and stuff like that.
Oh, no, really? I didn't. That's horrible.
Oh, yeah. They kill lots of birds.
That makes sense. That's horrible. I believe if you just type in Sky Braider.
It's like a phenomena. For some reason, the birds fly into them. I mean, and people have been studying.
Sky Braiders. Yeah, this is a new bladeless wind turbine, and it creates a buzz from the wind. And it just looks like a stick. It looks like a vibrator.
Oh, okay. And
it looks like a giant vibrator.
Into the vibrations.
Cool. I guess it's just a bladeless way to collect. So my thinking is, there's kind of multiple races going on here.
Yeah.
And one of the races is to free energy. You know, there's a lot of steam there.
Yeah, and that's what cool is about. I mean, the indoor cannabis revolution now that's driving the advances in horticultural lighting, like we're talking about. Maybe that shouldn't be happening, but to the extent that it is, that's why we have super high efficiency horticultural lights now.
Fuck yeah.
We have super high efficiency horticultural lights because of cannabis, people.
Exactly.
It's not because of tomatoes. It's because cannabis is providing the sort of the money in indoor horticulture right now. And it's providing the incentive for all of those things. And yeah, to the extent that we're going to develop freer or lower cost sources of energy, it does present potentially much better routes towards the gardening, towards vegetable crops and other things like that. Right now, we buy vegetables all around the world to get fresh vegetables to the consumer markets. If we could do indoor vertical farming and every city has an indoor vertical farm that was sustainable, that was driven by sustainable energy,
yes,
it would reduce the transportation cost of vegetables. It could even, since the transportation costs of fresh vegetables currently are so high, it doesn't have to be a carbon zero operation in order for it to be a huge benefit. So as we, that's where some of this stuff is going. And that's why that's another angle towards this. All of this indoor horticulture is driving innovation. We're getting better at it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a trade-off the way that progress works, because usually the industry does damage to the environment, but it makes progress exponentially faster. And then usually we circle back around and figure out solutions to some of the damage we've done.
Well, we have some pretty big problems that we haven't figured out solutions to yet. So it'll be interesting. I think we may be hitting the broken loop part of that sort of feedback cycle here, where
diminishing returns sort of thing.
Well, we're doing damage that we're not going to be able to circle back around and fix.
Yeah, I certainly hope that. I hope we don't go too far down that road, because you're right.
No, I mean, all indications are we have gone too far down that road in terms of releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, in terms of sort of those climate change issues. It seems like we have to prepare for a new normal. We're not going to be able to sort of salvage the planet that we used to know.
Jeez, man. That's actually bringing it back around to coffee, there's going to be a huge loss in coffee farmable land for that reason. Hey, I did want to say something though, because I quickly shot out something earlier that I kind of want to correct. You can definitely grow coffee indoors. Coffee makes a great houseplant. What I was saying is you can't farm it indoors. It takes like 4 years before it fruits.
Right. That's what I was saying. It's not an annual crop.
Right. I just wanted to be clear for the listeners. It is a good houseplant.
Sure, but not for production.
100%.
Decorative purposes.
I just wanted to be clear for those people who might have been writing me saying
cannabis is actually an interesting houseplant too, by the way.
True.
I occasionally keep a cannabis plant as a houseplant. Sometimes just as a banker, a processor plant, we always needed processor plants for the runoff. So this is another aspect of sort of my environmental sensitivity. I feed all of my runoff to other plants.
You've brought that up
and
before.
that requires a little bit of forethought in terms of making sure that I have plants.
Have enough plants. Requires a little bit of forethought and a lot of plants.
A lot of plants, although fewer plants than you'd think. I really don't produce a lot of runoff, so fewer plants than you'd think.
How many non-cannabis plants do you have in your living space?
Oh God,
it's like calling out a hoarder. That came out of my mouth.
More than a dozen, less than 3 dozen. I would say
2 dozen.
Probably somewhere around.
Wow,
20.
I thought I had a lot of plants.
I know I haven't counted.
That's a
we
lot.
do have a lot of potted plants, but my wife sort of does that, and not all of them are processor plants. Every potted plant doesn't do well with the nutrients. I will say though, my wife has become a little orchid specialist, man.
Oh, damn.
Our orchids are thriving. She's got an orchid with 2 big flowering.
That's not easy, right? That's a beautiful flower. That's kind of hard, a little finicky.
Awesome, man. Wow. And this is like an 8-year-old orchid plant. people often buy the orchid plants. They have it like it's blooming, they buy it, and then that's it. Like it never
just dies.
blooms.
Yeah, totally. It's like my orchids.
Yeah, she's got the orchids going, and so she keeps particular water. She likes the early bloom newts for that. Really, any of the bloom newts are okay for the orchid, but she's got it sort of figured out how much of the runoff to give and how much other water for different plants. I still think the philodendrons do the best with it in terms of being processor plants. If you get yourself a philodendron, it can a good sized philodendron can go through like a gallon of runoff a week. If you get yourself a couple of good philodendrons, they can take 2 gallons of runoff per week, and I can run a grow on 2 gallons of runoff per week. So you really don't need like a ton of plants in order to make this happen for yourself. But, you know, sometimes I'll have a cannabis plant that either gets sort of culled or, you know, is just not going to fit, or for whatever reason, we have a cannabis plant. And we'll just grow it as a house plant out in the living room and feed it runoff water just to sort of to help process some of the runoff water, because the cannabis plants do really well with it.
Nice, man. Yeah, that's the way to do it. I don't have to deal with runoff with my living soil, and I just take my leftover water and kind of water it down and give it to my 8 houseplants, because I don't have a problem like you do. I'm joking. I wish I had more.
It's not a problem. The houseplants freaking love it, man. So like anybody ever comes over to our house, they're like, "Oh my God, I love your living room. It's so lush and green." It's like, yeah, it's the cannabis water.
I meant the plant buying problem. Like you keep buying plants, and that's why you have 2 dozen. But I'm jealous. I love having. I'm the same way. I love having my space full of plants. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, we do the philodendrons up on the walls. So it's really funny. It's just staples. I train them to grow up all over our walls. We have a big, cathedral ceiling in our living room, the 2-story tall ceiling or whatever. And I have philodendrons. So I have to get an extension ladder to train them to grow up the wall like that, like the ivy.
Sick. Wow, man.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very tropical in our living room.
Damn, dude. Wow, a little peek into Casa de Coco. I never would have thought to use a vaulted ceiling as an extra large vine wall.
Well, yeah. I mean, I make our condo sound like, you know, the Taj Mahal or something. It's not that large.
No, but you use the vaulted ceiling. That's great.
Yeah. So you have like there's one part of the living room that is, you know, open to the upstairs. And that whole wall is got philodendrons climbing up it.
Brilliant. I love it, man.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Okay, listen, we did 2 of our 4 topics. This is how me and Coco roll. We'll get back to the others next time. Please write us, people, if you have questions for Dr. Coco, if you have subjects you'd like us to go into. Got to talk more about agricultural history. Coco, it's always a pleasure, man.
It is. Let me tell your people about a couple of things.
Please.
And invite them now, wrapping up. We're doing a strain review giveaway this month on April 1st. We're going to have a drawing. And the drawing is going to be for Grower's Choice ROI E720, which is a big, giant, beautiful grow light. Retail price is like $1,100. Giving that away for people writing strain reviews. So head over to Coco for Cannabis, write a strain review. You can write 10 strain reviews and get 10 chances to win, as long as your reviews are approved. It just has to be a strain that you've grown and have experienced, and you have to have a couple of pictures of it. So I hope everybody enters that. We're really excited about it. We have a new prize for international growers too. If you're outside of the U.S., the U.S. prize is the ROI E720. So check that out. We are also, like we talked about at the top, signing up for the Spring Autoflower Challenge. Photo periods or autos, but we got the Supernova auto that we talked about and the Party Cup auto. And, you know, if you're interested in seeing any of these things that we're talking about, or if you still want to believe that you shouldn't transplant autos, run a side-by-side, show us, we'll follow along, we'll see what's going on. You'll be able to compare your grows to literally hundreds of other autoflower and photo period growers growing at the same time. It's a hell of a lot of fun. We'll have a lot of giveaways and other things to do with that as well. And the final thing I just want to mention is head over to my YouTube channel. Check out what I've been doing with recent grow light tests. I'm about to drop a new video that will be out, I think, before this podcast drops. and I'm sort of plugging away with a bunch of cool new grow lights.
Hell yeah, man. We love those grow light reviews, so keep them coming. Check it out, everybody. Get in on that giveaway. Take down that grower's choice. Those things are cool.
Yeah, the cost of entry is just a strain review. It's fun to write strain reviews anyways. We're doing this entirely for the community. Like, we wanted to build out our strain review library. I think strain reviews are really helpful when you're sort of looking around for different things to grow. And you don't want to just read the reviews that are on the site where you're buying the seeds, because they probably, cut out all the bad reviews. Even if they didn't sort of make up the good reviews, they probably cut out the bad reviews and other things like that. And as growers, we're interested in more than just sort of like how it smokes. We're interested in how it grows and,
Yes.
how long is the flowering period? How much does it stretch? As well as how does it taste and how does it make you feel? So our strain review, we have an editor that sort of walks you through all of that. So anybody can write a really good strain review, and then they become really useful tools for the whole community. So yeah, participate in that. This is all about growing our cannabis community.
Love it. Absolutely love the partnership, the fruitful partnership between Coco for Cannabis and Growcast. Match made in heaven, as I say. All right, Coco, we'll let you go, buddy. Thank you so much for everything. Appreciate you, buddy.
Absolutely, Jordan. Always a pleasure to come on.
Yeah.
Grower love to everybody out there.
We'll be back soon, everybody. Be safe out there. We'll see you next time, and grow smarter. That's all for today, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Dr. Coco. Great episode today, as usual. Before we wrap it up, love to Rain Science Grow Bags. RainScienceGrowBags.com. Code GROWCAST for 10% off. 10% off. The world's best growing containers. These really are the best, you guys. You need to get out of those plastic pots and get into something else. And Rain Science is truly the best. They'll last forever. They're machine washable. Durable mesh allows breathability, and you get that air pruning. That's right, I've talked about it before. If you're not using one of these, then you need to up your game. Rain Science Grow Bags, use code GROWCAST. Save 10% on the best containers for growing. All right, everyone. Thank you to Jay Blank for doing the beat. Thanks to Start to Finish 710 on Instagram. Thanks to all of you listeners, all of you members. You make this possible. I appreciate each and every one of you dearly. All right, everyone. Best of luck out there. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.